Hey everybody, and welcome to another Learn to Digitize video. My name is Sue, and I am from OML Embroidery and OML Digitizing, and today we are talking about the fundamentals of applique. So there's been a lot of questions on the Facebook page about applique and how it's done, and I think a lot of people are making it too complicated for what they need to do. So what exactly is applique? Applique is where you add fabric, and it's a really fantastic way of doing things, but you add fabric instead of stitches. But there's two rules, I think, with applique. One is keep it simple. And the other one is just because you can add fabric doesn't mean that you should. So when I say keep it simple, most and the best applique designs are simple designs with one applique, not 5 or 6 or 10. I mean, you can do that if you have a huge, like, full back design. You can add more pieces, and it really is a lovely effect. But we're talking 4x4, 5x7 hoop, generally 1 or 2, not many more than that. So how do you do applique? Let's start working on that. So we're going to go to our toolboxes, and it's under applique, and of course still never remembered to change my mouse. Digitize applique, and that's what we clicked on. And what we're going to do, I guess we'll just do, maybe just a simple circle, because we're going to walk and talk through the tools and figure it out from there. So that's our applique. Now, if you're just looking at it, it just looks like a circle, and not even a very good one, but just a circle. If you look over here, it has the applique symbol. Now that's how we know that we've done it correctly, because it has the applique symbol. And it just keeps it, it basically groups it into one part. But let's look at those parts. And when I'm going to use break apart, and when you use the break apart, it's going to separate this, and it'll no longer be seen as an applique symbol, but that's fine. So that's our 3 parts we have going on here. 3, 1, 2, 3. And you can change them around. You can do different things, but it's we're just kind of picking it apart to look at the different parts. So that is on the top, and it needs to always stay on the top. There we go. So the first part up here, and again, this is it broken apart. I guess it still sees this as a applique symbol, but that's okay. So the first part is the placement stitch. And there's a couple ways of doing applique, and whatever you find easier is fine. So the first way of applique is the one I generally use, but it doesn't really matter, whatever you think is easier. I pre-cut my applique shapes. I just use my cutters, or I use a handy pair of scissors, and I pre-cut them, because you can print these out and just, cut it out and put it on your fabric and cut it out, and then it's done, or I send it to a cutter, whatever works. So this is the placement line, and if you are cutting it in place, you put the fabric down, because applique is usually the first one to go. Put your fabric down, this cuts over it. You take the hoop off of the machine. You don't take the material out of the hoop ever when we're talking about applique. We're just taking off the machine, and you grab a pair of scissors and you cut close to that edge. It's easy to do. Some people find it easier. It takes less time. You can just have some, scrap fabric that you're using, but you cut it as close as you absolutely can to that line. There we go. And then the next thing to stitch out, and they're all different colors, you do not have to change your thread each time. The colors are so for home embroideries that it will stop, because you do want the machine to stop. If you turn away and it keeps doing it, you're going to have a mess. So that is our fabric cut out. Now this zigzag stitch, or a form of a zigzag stitch, is a tack down stitch. And if you put this over top, and we're pretending we have the material there, if you put this over top, you can see what it's going to do. And it's going to tack down the fabric. So if you don't quite have it right, it's going to tack it down and hold it nice and solid. Another quick tip thing that you can do, if you pre-cut your fabric and it'll be precision cut with scissors or a cutter. You can put on some heat and bond on the back and just take a little mini iron and secure it right down. It sure improves the embroidery if you do it that way. I tend to do it that way. I find it enjoyable, and it just gives it a nice tack and holds it nice and flat, so you don't have any issues. And because everything's precision cut, you don't have to worry about this part. So this is the tack down. And then this one here is the finishing stitches, satin stitches, or otherwise. There's a couple different ways we can do this, but I'm going to show you this one. And that is how you make a simple applique. Now, I didn't put it back in the right spot, but that's okay. That's how it's going to look. And the inside of it is fabric. So what can you do? Let's look at it here. You can do, just color. Let's do factory. You can play around with this. It just gives you a general idea of what you're doing here. So the fabric, and let's do the color. You don't have to add the fabric. I don't always, but you can if you want to. So let's pick that again. I didn't have it highlighted, so that's why it didn't work. So there you go. That kind of gives you an idea of what you're doing. Now, because this still says that it's applique, that's how we could put the applique fabric. These ones here are just considered objects, because remember, we broke everything apart to be taking a look at it. So that's yellow. Let's change it to the outside to maybe a darker yellow, and you can see how cute that is. So you can play around with the different fabrics. You can bring in your own fabric. Hatch comes with a few going on. Aubrey Rose, that's kind of pretty actually, with roses in it. So you can put that in there, and it's just going to throw it in there so you can see it. Did I do the same thing again? Apparently I do that a lot. You have to highlight it and then change the applique fabric. All right. I probably do it all the time and drive myself crazy, but there you go. My mistakes are your learning. So there you go. It's not fussy cut or anything like that. So then let's work with our options here of what we can do. So pre-cut or trim in place. And what that'll do, the difference is just an extra die line for it. And that's kind of handy that Hatch puts it right in there. You can offset if you want. Generally, for beginners, I would leave all of this alone. So tack down stitch, which is stitch number 2, you could do a few different things. I prefer the zigzag stitch. I find that it holds it very well. So here on stitch type, you can do different stitch types, which is absolutely awesome. Now that's a little bit difficult to see because the zigzag stitches are showing, but you want to maybe move it out a little bit. But there's different stitches you can do. You can do like a zigzag. I don't know why you do that on the cover stitches. Satin or blanket stitches are generally standard. Of course, you can always think outside the box and do whatever the heck you want. That's my theory on it. Tack and cover ups offset. So you can offset means that it's moving it, right? So you can move stuff around, and this is basically doing it for you, which is kind of cool. So the tack down stitch is the second stitch and the cover. So if they're not quite matching up, you can play around with this. Again, generally, I don't change it a whole lot, but you absolutely can. So let's talk about our other tools here. So we did the Digitize Applique. We can't use any of these until I do something else. So let's do something else, just maybe a smaller kind of crappy circle. It's an oval, whatever, that'll do. And it uses all of your settings from your last design. So that makes it super handy for that. I messed around with this, but we can put that back. And this is all in one piece because I haven't used the break apart for it. I was just using the break apart to show you. So remove overlaps is the same as up here with editing. It's just going to remove overlap things. So that can be handy if you want, say, a little flower over top. You can put the flower, you can do remove overlaps, and it's going to remove everything, which is fine. So let's talk about partial applique. So if you were stitching this out, okay, this looks absolutely fantastic on the screen. But let's look at what we're doing. We're doing a placement stitch, a tack down stitch, and we're putting the fabric on. Sorry, we're doing the placement, putting the fabric on, tack down stitch, and a nice big bulky satin stitch. And then we're doing the same thing over here. So what's going to happen here? We know if we move this, we know that the yellow line is still going under here. And those are nice, satin stitches. And we don't really want that to show through. I mean, fine, you won't be able to see it, but I think it's going to produce a little bit of a bump. And it's not the greatest. It's not the greatest. I think we can do better. But we still have to, you can, manually digitize this. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And frankly, sometimes when you're doing applique, that's exactly what you have to do. But there's a faster way of doing it, and it is remove overlap, partial applique, and I'm going to show you what it does. So I'm going to highlight the two. One is over, one is under. That can't change. Once you do this, you're stuck where it is. And I'm going to click partial applique, and it doesn't look like anything has changed at all, but it has. If we pull this one back, we can see what it did, and it's brilliant. It's actually brilliant. So what it did, because you're still, no matter what, even if you're overlapping, you're still placing your fabric and doing the placement stitch and the tack down stitch. It was only the top stitch that we were worried about. So it's basically a remove overlaps, but with skill, let's call it that way, because you're still placing the fabric. You still need to tack down the whole thing. You could, tack down half of it and just leave this part with no stitches if you wanted, to cut or something. You'd have to do break apart, and that's a whole other thing. Let's not talk about that. But this does it neat and tidy. So the way this would work is placement stitch, fabric, tack down stitch, and for right now, this is going to stitch out. Our yellow is going to stitch out. And let's put this back where it was. There's going to be a slight amount of overlap, but there's nothing bulky under this circle. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love it. I think that's fantastic. You can, you can do a couple of these. I really don't recommend doing too many, but you can do a couple, and you can select this one, and you can shift select this one. It's going to do both. Let's click off. Me and my mouse. Let's select these two. Did that work? Nope, just not going to work. So this one, and control click this one. And then we can do partial applique again. And it did it again. So you can keep doing that. There we go. See, it worked absolutely perfectly. And that is what that tool is for, and that's just going to make it more simple for you. Now, this is a bit small. I really wouldn't want to be cutting out all those applique pieces, but that's okay. It still looks pretty cool. It almost looks like the fabric matches too. Awesome. And there too. Well, even better. I bet you couldn't cut it out that way. So there we go. And that is going to make 3 separate appliques, 2 of them on top of one. And make it look good just by a simple click. I absolutely love it. Now, what you can't do with this in a certain way is, let's go back. Let's do edit, undo, move, edit, undo. You can do Control Z, but I like to see what I am undoing, because you can go a little too far and undo things that you don't want. So that's why I do it up here. That's just me. Okay, we put it back to normal. What is not going to work, and what makes everything super complicated, say we put this one and now it's underneath. Can we do that? We can. So let's pick this one, and we have to pick this one and partial applique. That worked. So you can, what I was getting at is that you can't do this applique piece over this part and under. Okay, it's not really applicable for a circle, but say, for example, you had an arm or something and you wanted it under here but over here. You can't, none of these tools are going to help you with that, because what order are you going to stitch it out? to be able to do that. It makes it more complicated. So over and under will work, and it looks perfect. You just have to make sure you put everything in the right order. So for this one, instead of cutting this part, it cut on this egg. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's super. We can put everything back, and we have our little applique. But anyways, generally what I want you to do is only do one, maybe two appliques, because as you can see here, it gets a little bit complicated. Really though, I do know what I'm talking about, but really you don't want to make such complicated appliques. You will be cutting stuff out, and it doesn't work out properly. So the only thing we didn't talk about was this combine applique. What it does if you have, say, a dog and you have overlapping pieces and you did it in two pieces instead of one, and you have, this is what they show in the help guide. Actually, why don't we flip to that, because it's a perfect example. There's the remove overlaps, which you can see, you know how that works. We've done it before. And this is the partial cover applique, which we just talked about, which is kind of groovy. Now, combine applique, I guess I don't really show it as clearly as I thought it did. Combine applique, what it's going to do, and it does it all automatically, it's going to break apart your component objects and recombine in resequence for efficient stitch out, which blah blah blah. Let's make it so you can understand it. Each applique piece has three pieces, right? We went over that: the placement, the tack down, and the cover stitches. And so for an example like this of the dog, it's two pieces. I would probably actually do it a little bit differently, but just for the case of this. So the head is one piece, the bottom and the tail, his feet, his body, I guess, is two pieces. So you'd have to do one, then the other. If you use combine applique, what it's going to do is take it and break it into its three separate things, and it does it all automatically. It's three separate pieces for both of them, and then resequence. So what it's going to do is it's going to do one tack down or placement stitch, and then the other, and then one tack down stitch, and then the other, and then one satin stitch, and then the other. So that's what that all means. It's just going to neatly organize it for you. And there it is, an example. So that's one placement. It's going to organize all that for you. So, I mean, it's easy. They're talking break apart on there. So you can use that, and I think it would probably be super handy. So that's all the tools that we've gone through. We've messed around with the fabric, which is handy. You don't have to show it. It just kind of helps you, give you an idea. Pre-cut, trim in place, the different tack down stitches. I tend to leave it on zigzag. And different stitch types, and of course you can change the spacing and the width if you want it a little bit bigger. I have it in inches, but we can easily switch to metric if you need to see those. They're just the standards of what it comes with. So that's how I do it. Let's just start a new thing, because we're going to actually do a really cute applique. So let's do File, new blank design. Thank you very much. There we go. And I'm going to remove the hoop because I don't really need it. And we are going to bring in some artwork, and I should have it on my desktop. There we go. We're going to do a simple sunflower, because why not? Now, what I'm going to do, what is the size of this guy? Oh, it's too big. We're not digitizing a 17-inch. We can do it. I want it fairly big because we want to do some detail work, and I'm going to bring it back into the center. So where I'm looking up here is the size right there. That's 7 by 7. It's probably a little bit big, but it'll make it for good work. Right click and lock. I always lock my picture down because I tend to move things around and drive myself crazy. So let's hit 0. There we go. Now we're all ready to go. So let's click on the applique, and we're going to digitize applique, and we're going to do it right around here. So I want the center piece, because we want to do one piece that's applique, and the rest we're going to do in stitches, because that makes the best. You can't just have applique by yourself, by itself. We want to fancy it up a little bit better, but simple always looks better for applique. All I did was right click around the circle. It's a little bit off, but that's okay. We're going to make this look really good. Now we want this to be black, because we want the outside to be black. I think that'll look a little bit better. Now we can bring the circle in. We don't have to be that particular. Now I am doing stuff in the wrong order, but we're going to rearrange everything so it looks better. So why don't we highlight this? I won't keep doing that. And let's go to our applique fabric, and let's just put something in. What would we be doing? Linen. We could do leather. That would look cool. And we want it to be brown, just so we can see what we're doing. You don't have to do this part. I sometimes do. I sometimes don't. I don't think it really matters. Whatever you're comfy with. Now I couldn't find the right color that I wanted, so we're going to switch over here, and I still can't. That's probably close enough. Oh, that's better. There we go. Got it. Okay, and okay. And it's going to put fabric in, and you just can't see anything underneath it, and that's fine, but that gives you a general idea of, and reminds you, I guess, that it's fabric. Let's do something with a little more, so it looks, there we go. That looks a little more fabric-y to me. Now, that is not going to be the first thing stitched down, so this is where some people get a little bit confused. What we have to do to stitch this out properly and to make it look proper is that we need to stitch the petals first. We absolutely need to stitch the petals first, and then the applique is going to cover up everything and make it look a lot more finished and pretty much amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we did the applique first, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do it that way. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. If we go to digitize, which is what we're going to do, and we're going to digitize a closed shape, and this is fairly big, so I'm not going to use satin stitches. I am going to use tatami stitches, because the satin stitches, you'd get a split, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I want. So I did left click, right click, left click, right click, left click, and then you can just, actually I want a little bit of a curve in here, so right click, now you can press enter, and now you're done, and that did it perfectly. I am going to go right here to user interface, and where is it? Paint, no, grid, no, view, yeah, scroll, there we go. Auto scrolling. If you guys like that, you can leave it on. I find it irritating, and that's just because how I digitize. Now, there's a couple ways we can do the flower. More than one way. You can digitize each piece separately. It has actually nice definition in between, so I think that'd work out. You can right click, slide it over, and then you can click on it again, and this one. Oh, that's changing. I always do that. I hope everyone else does. There we go. And we're just going to change the angle. So, and we want it tucked under a bit, because remember, we want this to cover up. And you can keep going around like that, and we can do the same thing with these other pieces, although they look a little bit different, so we might manually digitize those quickly. Another way of doing it, let's delete this guy, another way of doing it, and it doesn't quite work out properly just doing it quickly, but we could figure it out and do the math. So I counted, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 10 of them, so I put the number 10 up here. And then you can just play around. It's not I mean, if you move it this way, they turn. It's a little bit fiddly, but if you can get it, you know, I just about got it right there on one side, not on the other. It's not a perfect circle. The flower is not a perfect circle, so that's why it's hard to get it on. It's not quite right, but I mean, you can always do that. Here's what you can do. Click and it'll do it, and then go back to your select, and then you can move it around. You can make it bigger. You can click off, and then you can move them around. They're basically at the right angle. See, they're not exactly the same, so I think that might be a little bit fiddly. You have to change, the angles weren't correct. You'd have to maybe get it a little more accurate. So let's undo that because we want this to be really good. Undo, move, undo, move. That will work. It's just going to take a bit of time. And you guys don't need to see me fiddling around. So let's get to the good stuff. So whatever way you want to do it, I think the circle layout will work perfectly. I want to change these guys to yellow too, so I can see what I'm doing, because I think that would make them, yeah, that looks better. And the outside petals, the ones that are underneath, are also a little bit different. They're not perfect. You can make it work and you can make it look good. Nobody says that you have to stick exactly to what you're seeing. If you want to change the petal placement, that's absolutely fine, and maybe we can do that afterwards. So I'm going on the inside of each, and I want a little bit of overlap because again, we want these stitches to cover over everything. So there's the second one, and we want that yellow again. There we go. And see how cute that is? And you don't have to be perfect about it. They all seem a little bit different to me. But again, if you wanted them to be exactly the same, use the circle tool. I think that would be a lot easier. I'm pretty quick at digitizing, so generally I choose to just you know, do it. Just absolutely do it. Whoops, and see what I did there? Do you guys do that all the time? Probably. That's okay. Quick fix. Left click, right click in the middle, left click here, and we want a little bit of overlap there, and then we can hit enter and it's going to finish it. So let's do this one. Left click, right click, left click, right click, left click, and we should be able to hit enter there, and it gives it a nice little cover over. But you see, you can manually digitize it to be exactly what you're seeing pretty quickly. The other ones are shortcuts, and I think they would work fine. For me, oops, I did that one a little bit wrong. I'm going to use the reshape, and I'm going to pull it down a little bit. I think I missed a node, so I'm going to click there and add another one. But see how quickly you can fix things up? I was just a little too energetic with my enter key, and I just went into the reshape and I fixed it up. Probably you should, to make it a little bit easier, you should zoom in a little bit more than I was. I tend to do it a little bit out. Let's grab our tool again. Left click, right click, left click, right click, left click, and we can hit enter. Did that one right. A little bit off there, but you know what? That's okay. Petals aren't exactly the same. Now this one has a curve. You can see if you're trying to judge if you're left clicking or right clicking. I left click there, and if you move it here, you can see that's pretty close, but there is a curve. So if we stick a right click, a curve in there, and a left click, it's perfectly on. So right click, left click, right click, left click, left click, same thing there. But you see, we've done a quarter of it already, and it's not that hard. It's not that bad doing it. And I know, say this was a logo, I know this is going to be exact, because if you're doing a logo, you really can't change the person's design and start moving petals around. So it's simple to do, and you get quite fast at it, and zoom in and you can get faster. And I think it's pretty easy, just as easy as any of the shortcuts, really. Left click, right click, left click for the point, right click there, and because it's Hatch, you only have to press enter. And I think we're halfway through. I bet you didn't think you could digitize that fast. It's not that bad. So yeah, tools are handy, but sometimes good old manual digitizing will do it. I think also if you are using, say, the circle tool, you could probably, do one of the full petals. But I think you could probably come up with, basically a new looking design by simply moving the petals around. As long as they are on the edge of the flower, of the center part of the flower, I think that would be fine. And you might be surprised that you come up with something completely different for the petals, and it'll change the whole design. So yeah, absolutely, it would look, everything would match up, it would be equal, and it might give it a different kind of look. I think that would be awesome. So we're still working away, and look at that, we're seriously almost done, and everything is going to be in a nice stitching order. We're going to have to move stuff around just a little bit because it is applique, but it is simple to do, and applique is all about simple and beautiful. You'll be surprised if you make everything simple. You will be absolutely surprised at how good your applique looks. And it doesn't matter if you trim it in the hoop or you pre-cut. It doesn't make any difference. It's just what you feel works easier for you. Some people insist that, you can tell I've dealt with people arguing with me. Some people insist that cutting it in the hoop is the only way and the better way because they feel it's more precise. And that's fine. Whatever you think works, I do it my way, and you do it your way. So these all turned out blue, so I'm shift clicking. I'm going to make them yellow. And what we're going to do now, grouping doesn't do anything other than keep your objects together. So I just shift clicked on all those, and I'm going to group them. It doesn't change stitches. It doesn't do anything other than to keep your stitching together, all of your objects together. So I group these just because I want to keep them together. And what we have to do, if you're looking at this, let's look at this in true view. And you can see why we have to move stuff around. You can see that these are over top because that's how I digitize them. I digitize them so we have a bit of overlap. But that doesn't work. So what we want to do is move all these guys, and I'm left clicking and holding and letting go. And now look how that changes. So all I did, and that's why I grouped them, because you really don't want to move them all separately. But we're stitching out the petals and then the applique. And look, let's step back. Let's take off our picture. Let's unlock it first. And let's delete our simple picture. Of course, that'll be included. The pretty flower will be included in there. And look what we have going on. This middle part is going to be material. Now, a couple of things you can do to jazz it up, although I do think it looks absolutely fantastic. I kind of like the spaces in between, but, and to work with separate things, you need to ungroup. So let's ungroup, that's all it does. So let's look at some options of things we can do. I actually really like it like this. I don't know, I think it looks simple. I think that would be really nice on a sweatshirt, or you could make a pillow out of it. How about add some lettering, life's a beach, or, bring sunshine into your day, because everyone should have a happy day. But let's look at what we can do for a couple of the petals. So what can we do? Edit objects. Let's go to create outlines and offsets, and we can mess around with this. So we want to create an outline, not an offset. We want them to be merged, and we're just going to do one and see how it looks. Now, I do, of course, want to change that color to, how about black? So, that looks okay. Make sure everything's hooped properly because you really want that to line up. Let's try something different. Let's try, what could we do? I think satin. This is what, 6 by 6? Satin might work. Yeah, that might work. Let's try this one. Let's go to create offsets and outlines, middle one again, and there. And let's change that one to black. So we're just going to do a whole bunch of different options. And then you can kind of see, because half of the fun of embroidery is playing around and getting a different look. Just because you see it doesn't mean that you have to do it. And of course you can change it right here. Let's try stem stitch, and I keep forgetting like twice before. Let's change the color here, and then I don't have to do anything. How's that for awesome? I don't think I really like that, but let's keep trying. Just options. Stem stitch. Have we tried back stitch? Yeah, that one. See, I think that looks better than just the single stitch, kind of because of the size. If you were to make this smaller, I think that would look fine. I also think that looks closer to the picture, and I kind of like it, but I kind of like the level of back stitch there. I think that looks good. Have we tried everything? Well, I'm not sure that motif will work, but oh, well, it kind of does. That one's not too bad. The one it pulled up, not too bad at all. Where are we? Right here. Make sure you click on the right one. Let's see if maybe we can try another one. The dots are okay. We would, want to remove some overlaps there, but we're just playing around here. What about something like that? Nope, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. I'm not sure if I'm going to find anything that will work. I'm not really sure. That one, maybe something like that. Well, that kind of gives it, it doesn't match up there, but you could mess around with the width, height, and spacing and kind of it kind of makes it look like an Aztec-y kind of sun. So why don't we leave that one? Let's try another one, because I'm thinking maybe motif might be kind of groovy. I'm not really sure. Let's pick the right one. There we go. Because that one isn't too bad. You would, again, have to play around with everything. What else? Well, that one's okay. It's not going to be my favorite. No, it's a pretty small space that we're dealing with, so I'm not thinking too many things. Well, as I'm saying it, I'm like, well, that's not bad either, is it? So that's a few options. I think maybe for this size, this one probably looks pretty cool. I kind of like that though, surprisingly. I also kind of like that. I think that's kind of groovy indeed. So let's try one more. Create outlines. It's so easy to do and to just play around. And this is how I decide what I'm doing with a design. I sit and I fiddle around, and eventually something's gonna hit you and you go, wow, that's it. What a big difference from what I started off with doing. Wow. Not all the time, but it does happen, and I think it's awesome when it happens. Maybe something like that. Well, see, that just absolutely didn't work at all. I don't think I'm going to find anything else. Now, I said that last time and it worked. I'm just not sure if it's going to work this time. It's just the small space. So no, let's make this one. I don't think we tried triple run. Looks pretty much the same. I like that better. And we can do one more because we're halfway through here. And there's so many options, and there's so many things to do. So many ways of doing it. Oh my goodness, it just makes it incredible when you're playing around. I always tell everyone, play around as much as possible. 3D satin. What about blanket stitch? Yeah, a little bit of spacing. We can move it around a little bit. That's another one we can try. That one's okay. I don't mind it. It doesn't even have to be black. We could make, why don't we have a look at that? Where is it there? Let's make it kind of orangey. That doesn't show up very well. What about red? Fire colors? See, that kind of works. I don't really mind that. It's not terrible or anything. So that's quite a few options. We've played around with motifs, different stitches. Why don't we try one more thing? It just came to mind. Try. Let's go here. Make sure we click on the right one and change it to satin, and everything comes up here. What about the calligraphy one? See, now, wow, that is an excellent option. I really like that one. That kind of gives it a little more depth. You see how it's thick and thin? And that is just satin stitch with the calligraphy option. So that's just regular satin stitch, and this is the calligraphy. I kind of like that. It kind of gives it a little more balance, a little more everything. These ones are good too, but I think that's my favorite. So wow, what a long process to get to that. I didn't think of it after I did the satin because I was thinking about all these other fancy things. So I saw it and I thought that would be good. So it took all of that to get to exactly what I want. And that's how playing helps you do better embroidery. So let's keep playing, why don't we? Let's try a different pattern or two in here. Something, well, that adds interest. You could do, that one that way and that one, an opposite way even. Of course, we can go in and change the angles and make them how we want. But let's try something different. Let's try random stitches are kind of groovy. Yeah, that kind of looks neat. So there again, that's a couple options right there to make our sunshine look better. What else? What do you guys think? Maybe something like that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. See, these are just plain tatami stitches, and there's nothing wrong with tatami stitches. You don't have to make anything fancier than what it was. The outline, I think if you did the plain tatami stitches with the calligraphy outline, I'm thinking that looks absolutely fantastic. But we're just playing. We're just playing here. So let's try another one. How about embossed? It's a little bit small for that. Yeah, see, I'm not too keen on that. Let's try another one though. Circles. Yeah, I think that it may be okay. Maybe. Maybe. Of course, you can play around with these too, and you can change the angles and it might suit better. Oh, that one's kind of neat. That one doesn't look too bad. I'm just thinking sometimes plain is better. Just because you have fancy stitches doesn't really mean you should use them. That one's not bad. So why don't we take that and we put an outline, and we're just going to do satin. And then we're going to take that satin, where are we, down here, this one, and we're going to do calligraphy. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure at all. Calligraphy for sure, I'm really enjoying that. Let's do another calligraphy one so we can kind of get the idea of what we're doing here. And we have to go back. Where are we? We're close to the end here. Oh no, are we running out of ideas? Calligraphy, I just wanted to do a couple of them. Yeah, see, that looks so good. That, for me, that's what I'm choosing. But, we still have some options. Why don't we try ripple stitch? And that didn't really work. Let's try it on this one, ripple stitch. I mean, that's okay, I guess, if you want it. It's going to be kind of weird with a solid piece of material and then a design like that. Sometimes ripple works, sometimes it just doesn't. There's a few things we could do. What could we do? Stipple blanket. No, we could do satin, I guess. See, it's gonna split it. That's kind of a neat look, I guess. I'm not too big on that one. You could mess around with different stitch settings. I don't see anything else that I would like to try. I'm not thinking that would work. I don't know. We could try contour. No, I don't think contour is going to work either. But actually, even like that, that looks kind of groovy, doesn't it? I kind of like it. I really kind of like it. So we've got two more. What are we going to try? Cross stitch isn't going to work. We could try a different motif. What else have we got going on? None of these stipple quilting stitches are going to work. And we certainly don't want to do that because, wow, what the heck? Blanket stitches aren't made for filling. So let's quickly undo that and pretend it didn't happen. There we go. So, well, I guess we could just try another embossed one. I guess I didn't give it enough of a chance. It is kind of groovy. I didn't give it enough of a chance and try. Let's see. And remember, you can change the angles of these embossed stitches. That one's okay. That one is okay. You can go to reshape and you see this line here. You can change, because right now you can see the main line is going here to here. If you wanted to change that, you just hover over and you could make it this way. See, it changes the whole thing. So that's oh, I kind of like that one. That one's not too bad. Let's move the angle here. Well, that's not too bad. Why don't we leave that one? That one is an acceptable one. This one is not. So let's well, that's another thing you could do, I guess. Let's see. You come up with so many things to try. That is a motif stitch on the inside instead of the outside, and I didn't think of that before. I'm not thinking it'll work, but you know what? Maybe it will. That one is a bit too busy. Remember the sizes. Well, that's not too bad. A flower design. Thinking, do we want thick and airy? Well, that one's okay too. Just might make everything a little too busy. You got to watch on the busyness level. And of course, you can modify these. If you find one that you think looks good, you can make it bigger or smaller, and you can move it around. That's okay. I guess it would really depend on what you want and what you are, embroidering it on, of course. What did we try? So that's another whole other idea right there. That is a lot of ideas just for some petals, but this is how we figure it out. If you want to just do the flower and just leave it the way it was, I think that's fine too. And no, you don't want to do all these different ones. Just pick one and do all of them. Let's see. Yeah, I think I've pretty much gone through. I love this Christmas one. We must do something that we can use that on. I must. See, that's okay too. It's okay. Those definitely don't work. To me, that is my favorite. That is my absolute favorite right there. We've got one more. What are we going to throw in there? We've got quite the design indeed, with all of these petals being completely different. Let's try another pattern one, because I think those might be, yeah, that one's not bad. I'm gonna have to put a satin line on it and then click on the satin line and make it into calligraphy and see. Now that's okay. I don't mind that at all. And I left enough space in between. You might want to make the calligraphy lines a bit thinner. I mean, that looks like a kooky looking sun, but look at all these options. And, you don't have to play around with each like this. But now, the other thing that I need you to do before you attempt to stitch this out, obviously we're not going to stitch it out like this because that's kind of like a patchwork sun applique crazy thing. We don't want to do that. So pick one, fix it up, or do, maybe 4 of them in a design or something like that. Don't make it too busy, but you're going to have to organize everything. And when you are organizing, you can do a color sort, but we want to be a bit careful. You just left click, drag, and you put everything in the right order. But you have to bear in mind that it has to be all of this stitching and then the applique, because the way we've designed this is that the applique is the last thing to go on, and it's going to be covering up all of these inside edges. So if you are organizing it and you move the applique around, now remember it's all in one piece, so you're not going to make a very big mess. An easier way of doing this, now that I've got that organized, is shift and then move it here because I can't get up anymore. And basically for this one, we want the yellow to stitch out first. Now I've messed up my order, so you're going to have to go back through. But this is part of digitizing. I know not everybody likes it, but you have to have stuff organized properly before you stitch it out, because you could have quite a mess going on. And the way that we've done it here is I want the yellow. See, it doesn't take very long. You have to think about what you're doing. And what I have done here is that I've messed up the order because I wasn't paying close enough attention. I was just kind of moving stuff around. So before I stitch this out, and of course I'm never going to stitch it out with all this fancy stuff on it, but we want this one and then closest join to that one, to that one, to that one. If you have jump stitches by any chance, you can run them underneath. There shouldn't be because they're close enough. The jump stitches, say between this one, let's look, because I want everyone to start optimizing their stuff. Here, we want it. And then you can just click on here. It doesn't change anything but the start and stop points. Go to reshape. Yes, and see it moved everything. So basically, no jump stitch. You don't see any jump stitch going on. And we want this one to be the next one. See, I've got these ones in order. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, and it's got to go all the way around and optimize them. And then we go to the black parts. They must be in the same order too. Let's check our start and stop points. I don't see any jump stitches, but you see we want that one to go here. And basically, if you put them all at the bottom, and we do need to cut this up a little bit because that's going to show through. So we can do that. Hold on. I totally forgot about that, but this is all part of the optimization. This is all part of the optimization, and I want everyone to start doing it because you have to have neat and tidy, organized embroidery designs before you stitch them out. Now, another problem we have is if you look here, and we can zoom in a little bit more to see what we're talking about. All of these satin stitches and calligraphy stitches and all of these ones are underneath. I wouldn't bother with these ones because they're not going to create any bulk. But if you're doing the whole thing in satin stitches, that might be a little bit difficult. I think you could get away with it, but maybe you shouldn't. So let's organize it. So all you have to do is click on this one part and click on remove overlaps. And what it's going to do, let's say for example, this one would have been kind of big and it might have showed as a bump. It's now kind of cut them off, and so they're perfectly done. You're going to have to mess around a little bit. It doesn't always work perfectly. Now these ones, we want the overlaps. That's fine. That one's okay. What happened here? Oh, see, it doesn't always work perfectly. It doesn't work perfectly at all because that one kind of got messed up. The rest of them are okay, so just go through and check. So when I say at the end of a classroom video, when I say optimize your work, what I just did there is what I want you to do. Make sure you don't have jump stitches. Make sure everything is in the right order so you get smooth stitch out. A happy stitch out makes a happy digitizer. And these are the things, it's kind of like housework. Nobody really wants to do it, but you kind of have to, or else you're going to have a messy design. And nobody wants a messy house, and nobody wants a messy design. So take the time. Probably if I was doing this myself, my workflow is a little bit different. I do everything manually, just how I was taught. It's just how I roll and how it works in different programs. So I would, as I'm digitizing, I would have everything in the right order. But there's nothing wrong with moving it around at the end too. So as long as you do it, it doesn't matter how you do it. Some people find it way too tedious and they skip it, but I find this part easier than cutting a whole bunch of jump stitches. Say you had jump stitches on each one from here to here to here. That to me is kind of crappy. And that's going to take a longer time to do all the jump stitches. And same, say you had jump stitches, you had the start point here and the end point here. That's a yellow jump stitch. And if you do the outline and you did the same thing, you would have a black jump stitch. So really you're going to cut, and then you have all the frayed edges, but you're going to cut every single one. No, optimize your designs and you won't have that. Do a little bit better than I did, but there it is. So that is applique fundamentals, what order to put them in, using all the tools, and doing a kind of cute, it's a little kind of wonky right now, but kind of cute, simple applique that once you finish it, it will stitch out fantastic. Remember to put everything in the right order, optimize everything, use the shortcuts if you want to, and make something that'll stitch out as nice as it looks on the computer. So thanks everyone for this class. We are going to do some more applique classes coming up, so watch for them. So we're going to get a little more complicated. We might do two different appliques, but this is your basics. I hope everyone enjoyed the class, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everyone.